that. But I think the biggest thing that I think has gotten individuals like us a little antsy and a little stir crazy is just the lack of sports content. I know you're probably the same way as I am. Like, you're just begging for something, anything to happen. And it's really interesting to see how all these sports leagues, both in the professional and in juniors as well, are thinking about trying to come back. Starting, of course, with baseball, they're the team that's kind of under the gun right now because their season should have already started, but it's currently on delay, and they're trying to get back in the swing of things.
Yeah, no, it's at this point, it's just the not knowing is the toughest part for everybody. I got this list on lists of just different story ideas and different stuff to just keep us rolling, and keep us going every day. And of course, daily news is always a godsend when it comes in. But when it comes to this scenario, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, at least. And that's why I think people are extra antsy. It's because there's not really an end in sight yet. It's just kind of slowly getting back. We were talking about before the Zoom call how NASCAR is slowly coming back with no fans. UFC slowly coming back with no fans. Korean baseball is going on live right now, and that's what people are watching on ESPN right now. That and The Last Dance is pretty much all anyone is excited about right now. So it's just waiting for just more information and for us to slowly get back to normal. But honestly, Jason, I don't know if we'll be back to normal sports for a while.
So I think that kind of begs the question, what does sports look like in the new normal? Not only for just summer, but also for the fall as well, when, for example, hockey gets back in going. I know the NHL is thinking about, they're still going as business as usual. Obviously, they pushed back the draft. NHL, we have a supplemental draft coming up this month. We have the entry draft coming up next month. Jackalopes and a bunch of other teams have pushed back their pre-draft and main camps as well. But as of right now, from what I've heard, now things obviously may change, that they're still looking to start around the same time as they usually do. But what do you think sports is going to look like in this new normal of social distancing?
Well, at least early on, I think no fans is going to be a kind of a normal thing. Early on, like right now, I'm talking this next couple months, maybe just a month. When it starts to coming back, when it starts to really come back, hopefully, because a lot of colleges are planning football season is getting going, are planning as normal, football is happening because obviously, at least from a financial standpoint, that's massive for all these colleges, right? So they want it to plan to be normal, but in my opinion, just from what I've gathered from everything that's been going on, I'm thinking there's going to be a stadium that's got to have social distancing, maybe, every 2 seats, kind of a person, something like that. Because when you think about, what the CDC, recommends, I mean, just forget fans, just the teams, the athletic staffs, the coaching staffs, the referees, the broadcast, all that, just that, it's already 300 people just from the amount of people I just named,
Yeah.
And then, everyone else who's required to be there, so that's already a lot of people in one spot, and let alone, trying to fit 20,000 seat arenas, and stadiums. So I think there's got to be some kind of slow precautions if we get back to that kind of normalcy of sport, because I mean, let's say just football, it's a lot of guys just on one field, where, as we know with coronavirus, it's, not only where have they been, but who they're hanging out with have been, and it's just a lot of what ifs and a lot of, again, unknowns that might make this take longer.
Exactly. And the other thing you have to remember is all of these individual guidelines that the individual states have. Like, for example, Texas, as of the time of this recording, they're still only limiting athletic activities to about 4 people. Well, yeah, you can go play golf, but that takes kind of baseball off the field and pretty much almost any other major team sport, at least for the time being.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. It does depend on each state, because some states don't have the same laws, and teams from different states, they're bouncing back and forth. Flights, I mean, people aren't really flying yet either. That's a huge one, dude. So there's so many parts of this that are just so fluid right now, you know,
Right.
so it's real difficult.
It's real difficult, but you also have some of the international politics playing as well. Like take the NHL for example, but then again, any major sport that has teams in both America and Canada. I default to the NHL because I'm obviously a hockey person. But as of right now, the Canadian-American border is still fairly closed right now. So you're going to have a real difficulty on having those teams come back and forth for competition. I think I read an article just this morning about Prime Minister Gaudreau basically saying, like, look, if team's going to come into Canada, they have to isolate before they can play, or something to that extent. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, I guess you can say, to really get competition back to where we want it to be, because we as fans and as sports connoisseurs, we crave it. We just crave it. We can't get enough of it.
And we're not the only ones, you know, these players, these coaches, they want to get back to that too. I mean, this is what they do, you know, of course they want to.
Mm-hmm.
But you just mentioned, or you reminded me of a decent point too, that, man, these players have families. These players, you know, have people that they want to see in their lives. Like, sure, you know, their job is important and, you know, entertainment to a lot of people and a lot of financial attributes to all of this. But let's say, for example, the NBA is weighing, you know, Vegas or Disney World as options to kind of create a bubble, you know, and have, you know, everyone who's important is just stays in there. There's plenty of places to play basketball. They can have, like, at Disney World, I'm pretty sure it was like 8 games going on at once, you know, full courts, all normal, whatever, finish the season. But then that means these players and the coaches and everyone involved in those bubbles can't see their families that entire time, you know? So sure, that would potentially work and keep everybody safe, but then these people are still humans, you know? They have to see their families. They have to do those kind of things, you know? Clayton Kershaw, when the thought was brought up of everyone going to Arizona, because obviously they do spring training there and there's plenty of fields to play. And he said, well, I'm not doing that. You know, I want to see my family, you know? So you have to understand that side too, where I don't think a lot of people remember their people with families and with people that they want to see, and being isolated for that long, even for the leagues to continue, may not be realistic either, even though it might be safe enough, you know?
And this is where I think at least in the professional side of things, where the league and the players' unions really have to find a good balancing act, because if you satisfy one, you don't satisfy the other, then you have all kinds of difficulties. You got to find a solution that works for both. Like, just taking the NHL, for example, I've heard that they're really looking at a 2014 playoff in select locations, maybe as early as June or July, that have 24 teams, and they play their quick playoffs, and then they'd have their next season start a little bit later. They're currently in their phase 1 right now, but which is essentially a lockdown, keep everyone in place, shelter in place kind of deal. But they're looking maybe to go to phase 2. I've heard as soon as mid-May, which is individual testing. They test players. They can do individual training, kind of like a training camp. Then phase 3, teams go into isolation, but they're still like there as a team, and they're, I guess you want to call it, their tournament sites. I guess that's kind of the term we had back in my peewee days playing youth hockey. And then phase 4 is return to play in their kind of tournament style way, 2014 playoff. I mean, I'd love to see more hockey, but at the same time, one, like you said, you have players isolated away from their families for so long. 2, does that kind of by having 24 teams in the playoff, does that kind of dilute the product that is the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is, at least in my opinion, the most impactful and the most energetic and intense postseason in all of sports, hands down, especially overtime.
It's definitely underrated. Doesn't have a different get enough credit. If you watch a hockey playoff game, I mean, you're on the edge of your seat the whole time, because anything can happen at any moment, and it's fantastic.
Exactly. Geez, I'm getting flashbacks back to in my high school days watching this Blackhawks, and they go to triple overtime against the Boston Bruins. Boy, you talk about late nights and a lot of sweat.
I mean, oh my God, I remember the Kings making that huge run from the bottom seed and making it all the way. I mean, I don't even remember how many overtimes there was in that run, but oh my God, it was too much. Too many game sevens too.
Too soon. The Kings beat the Blackhawks
Oh,
in Game 7 of the Western Final. My dad was at the building at the United Center, and I'll never.
Oh, you guys got us plenty of times. You're fine.
No, but here's the thing, though. Had the Blackhawks won that game, they would have romped past New York, and they would have had a three-peat. They would have had a three-peat in the Stanley Cup. And I'll never forget my dad coming home saying, everyone in that building thought for sure the Hawks were going to win that game, and then they did.
Everyone in the world thought that. I mean, like the Kings were the Cinderella story. You know, sometimes it's just their year. I'm sorry. We'll move on.
Moving on. Getting back on track here.
Yeah.
The other thing is, by the time if you have playoffs that late into the summer, are most of your fans going to be kind of turned off to hockey? I had a conversation with a couple of my friends and my dad, and they were all saying kind of the same things. Like, by the time it hits June, July, they're kind of checked out of hockey. So is that gonna play a part into it, do you think?
I think it's a different kind of situation, though. I mean, normally maybe yes, but I can't imagine that if it comes back in some way, people are going to be like, no, I don't really feel like it anymore.
Yeah.
I think people are going to be like, oh my God, thank God it's back. I'm in, whatever it is. I mean, people are watching Korean baseball right now live. I mean, people want anything. You're saying they're craving it so bad. I don't think it matters when it comes back. If it comes back in any way, I mean, hockey, basketball, anything, any of them.
Right.
The people are going to eat them up. I mean, eat them up. These ticket sales, I bet, will go crazy, even if it's the social distancing or however they do it. The ratings are going to be up through the roof, I bet as well. I feel just like, based off of what you're saying and what I also agree with, I mean, the hunger for sports is so high right now that whenever it does come back, it'll be full blast as far as the love and attention it's getting.
So let's bring it a little bit local. Let's bring it back down to the Permian Basin in West Texas. Obviously, we have the Rockhounds. They're still in hiatus, from what I understand. When do we think we're going to get to see the Rockhounds back in operation? Obviously, things are just starting to open up in Texas and in the Permian Basin area. We still got a ways to go until Texas is fully reopened. We still got to guard against that dreaded second wave. I know that's kind of the forbidden word, but that's got to be on everyone's mind. We still got to make sure that this is not a fight that's over yet, because we need to make sure, at least in my opinion, that we need to continue to do everything that we need to do so that we can fully reopen, and then we can have these sports back again and enjoy the summer and eventually hockey season.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I can't speak for the Rockhounds, but I so far from what I've seen from the MILB's moves, it's just whatever the MLB's doing, the MILB follows suit, And for now, that is nothing yet, and just kind of hoping to inch closer to it. But that's what I've seen for sure. As long as the MLB will slowly be making moves, the MLB will just follow that right away, and that's, unfortunately, the answer is we don't know, for when they really will come back.
Yeah. I heard something that I think in the last couple of days that the MLB is thinking about maybe starting some kind of training camp in May in Arizona, or maybe even, on a best-case scenario, I've heard, a July 1st start with every team in their home ballpark. Boy, wouldn't that be poetic? America's pastime starting up just before Independence Day. Wouldn't that be?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I mean, because you know how big July 4th is for baseball in general. I mean, baseball on July 4th with a hot dog and fireworks. I mean, that is literally poetry in a day. I mean, that's all people want on July 4th, So it absolutely is a big goal, I would assume, with the MLB to try and get back for that day specifically.
Right. And I think, like the MILB, I think when you're looking at the North American Hockey League and for the Jackalopes, I think they're going to be following closely the protocols that the NHL is going to put in place for when they try to eventually come back. Our season was already canceled, so it's not like we're trying to make up games. But I think the big focus is how can we start preferably on time when we hit September and October. And two key things you got to look at when you lift back up to 30,000 feet. first, obviously, how can you guarantee the safety and the health of the players, the coaches, the officials, and the game day operations folks, like the broadcasters, for example, the ticket takers, the scorekeepers, guys who are running the Zamboni. How can you guarantee those guys' health and safety? So, I mean, I don't know of any individual precautions that they're going to take yet. Obviously, I think in the next couple of weeks, maybe months or so, we'll maybe get a clear idea. And I think a lot of these hockey leagues, these junior hockey leagues, going to be looking towards the NHL for inspiration or direction. I mean, who is it? Maybe mandating that every coach and official and player wear full face masks, like those full plastic bubbles that we've seen some players in the past wear. Maybe not the coaches, but certainly the players and the referees. Maybe. Could it be mandated that, you know, off-ice warm-ups only go for this long, or shortened warm-up sessions? I don't know. I don't know what those protocols look like. And finally, you also have to maintain consumer confidence and encourage consumer confidence. Make the fans believe and know that their health and safety is our top priority, at least off of the ice. And make them fully confident that if they go to, say, a Jackalopes game or any other sporting event, and it's not just hockey, that they're going to be safe and they can enjoy this in relative safety. And I know, having talked with folks at the Ector County Coliseum, they're looking at implementing some new policies that are still kind of in the beta phase, if you want to call it that, to use a technical term. But those are conversations that are happening right now. And I'm still looking forward to getting hockey started in September and October, and also certainly getting the Jack Shack rocking again for a new era of Jackalopes hockey. That's just me personally.
That's all of us, my man. That's all of us for sure. We all want to go out there, man. I mean, that's the hope. You know, that's the. I'm just hoping that these fall sports can come together. That's my hope right now. You know, first, you know, obviously being NBC affiliate, I mean, I was so excited to cover the Olympics, man. That was a huge part of this summer for us. You know, and now that it's moved, it really hurts because you know, I might not be able to cover it at that point. You know, we'll see. You know, and so that was the goal, I guess, for the summer. Like, okay, hopefully the Olympics can still happen. Now that that's out of the way, I really feel like at this point it's just, will football happen? You know, and now are these teams going to lose out? I mean, they are losing out on these spring seasons now. You know, these big programs and the small programs. You know, how is it affecting these teams moving into, if there is, the beginning of the fall season? You know, I mean, this affects everything. I mean, eventually for high school football around this area, 2 days are coming up in August. You know, is that going to happen? You know, so so there's so many things of just hoping they will, and if they don't, how they affect the season that, again, hopefully will happen.
Right. And speaking of college football, I know NCAA is still, I think, on a moratorium on team activities until July 1st, and then they're going to reevaluate. I mean, that does another big question, I'm sure, on a lot of people's minds, not just people in West Texas. When is football going to happen, NFL and college? That's an interesting question, and I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, what are campuses doing, because I think I find it really hard to believe that at least NCAA football would go full steam ahead if they didn't have college kids on campus. That just doesn't seem right. Even if they have to play in empty stadiums, I still think you need to have the college kids on campus. There's just some, coming from a Big Ten institution, and I know coming from a football culture, you just need to have that campus atmosphere.
I mean, beyond needing to have the campus atmosphere, first of all, I totally agree. You definitely need that. But beyond that, I mean, how can you bring student athletes to play if the students aren't on campus to learn? You know, that's a huge side of it, right? So recently I did this story where we covered and we looked at all the Texas universities, right? And schools like Texas A&M planning to bring football back at a normal way for now. Like their president says that things will be getting back to normal. You know, that's a good plan. You know, other schools that are planning to come back to normal are Texas, Baylor, Texas Tech. They're hoping to get to that point where this fall students will be on campus. That's the plan, right? And in that way, that means that football would be back as well if that were to happen. Now, Big 12 Commissioner Bill Bowlesby said that we need to see more of a normal college life before we think about bringing these athletes back on the field. So that's kind of exactly what we're talking about. We need to see that college on campus can go to somewhat of back to normal before we can start talking about the sports coming back, because at the end of the day, these are educational institutions. That's the number one priority, and it should be. So until we see that, I don't, or hear more about real for sure plans and confirmed plans that students will be back on campus. Until then, I don't know if we'll know any more about football and other sports coming back.
Right, exactly. And you hit it the nail on the head there. You need to have the students on campus, because how does it make sense to bring those athletes to campuses if they can't learn? I mean, that's what they're here to get, an education first and foremost. But one of the things I also believe, that the funny thing about Americans, we are arguably we are the most resilient people on the face of the earth. If anyone can get things done and get a handle on this virus, continue to practice safe social distancing, and continue to really work and come together, it is us. And the most resilient Americans I have found reside in Texas, specifically West Texas. So I'm fully confident we're going to get sports back sooner rather than later. What guys and what they'll look like you said, and like we think we've agreed on, we don't know, but eventually they'll be coming back, and eventually we'll be working towards our new normal.
Yeah, man, that's all it is. You got to keep the hope. You got to keep the faith. Texas AD Del Conte said something that stuck out to me. He said, "Well, we're planning on everything coming back to normal. We're planning on having a full season, and you have to be optimistic, but you also have to prepare if that doesn't happen.
Exactly.
You have to keep that optimism, but be realistic that it could change at any moment. And that's kind of where I'm at. Keeping that optimism, keeping that positivity that things will come back, and it just will take a little bit of time, but it will be here. And if things need to change, they'll change, and we'll adjust. But as you mentioned, we'll get through it. We will get through it. I promise you all, we will get through it one way or another. Obviously, this virus has taken a huge toll on our world and on our country. But as you mentioned, we are all resilient, not just our country, but the world, and we can get through it. We will get through it. And that's easy to say, harder to do, but I truly believe that we have it, and we have it within us to reach that other side.